Hey, so FileMaker 13 gives us a lot of opportunities for how to make kind of nice buttons with nice little hover effects. And we've been trying to decide what we want to do and what are the easiest to modify. Because you can go pretty crazy with this and make some great stuff in Photoshop and then drop it in here. But we wanted a button that is pretty easy to modify. And so this is kind of what we've settled on, this behavior right here. There's the click, so plain, hover, click. And this is what we thought we wanted to do, but have decided it's a little too complicated. So I just wanted to kind of talk about why we landed on this one and why this and maybe some other things like it are a little complicated. The general idea here is it's tough to get icons to behave with the button text. Things like this look like they're behaving with the button text, but really aren't. And it turns out that this is a lot easier to modify. So what's the difference? Well, let's go into layout mode and check this out. So what this guy really is there's only one object here. And what we've done with it is kind of tricky. If you go to appearance, we've got a fill of, and you can probably see this little icon here, a fill of this image. And so that's the fill. And you'll see a couple of things that are interesting about it. One is the way we've done the slice. And this is a technique I want to show people because there are opportunities to use this. I just don't think buttons are necessarily the greatest one. So if we want this to, watch what happens when I resize this. It gets kind of weird. But if I keep it in its original size, this slicing technique lets it work at any length of the button, which is kind of cool. So the way you do that is you just kind of bring everything together in the center, and you can see what's kind of happening over here as I don't. You bring everything to the center and then everything to one edge, and it looks really nice. The only trouble with this technique, and the reason we finally decided to get rid of it, is that see this little space over here to the left of the button? You actually have to do that in Photoshop. So when we saved this PNG, we actually had to save it with this space over on the left because FileMaker's padding only applies to the text, right? It doesn't apply to the button. And that's kind of a problem. So it turns out that while this is a cool technique, then what you simply have over here is you have a different, bring this up, you have a different PNG for every state, right? So a brighter one for the, and maybe a brighter one for the click. It just seemed like a lot of work. You had to get these exactly the same size on the left-hand side of the icon in order to get the hover state and the press state to line up. And you have to do this slice technique, so it's very difficult to do something like this and make the button bigger. So while I like the fact that this hovers like this and the icon hovers with the text, we gave up on it because it requires too much work to do in Photoshop. You could even go further in Photoshop, of course, and make the fill color part of the image and then have the whole button basically drawn in Photoshop, and all you do in FileMaker is select which state Photoshop image to bring in. I guess in fairness, we use Pixelmator now instead of Photoshop, but that just seems like a lot of work. So what we're doing over here is actually a lot simpler, and then to kind of look at how this works. So we have a hover, we have a click, and the icon isn't really keeping up, and the reason is because the icon is just a completely different object. We've made that icon. These are just straight up little icons, but these are icons that we've made transparent, so the actual image is slightly transparent. And the reason we did that is because, well, we wanted it to kind of pick up whatever background color it's on. The button is actually on top of it. That's important in WebDirect, right? Because WebDirect doesn't understand stacking. So it's important that the button is actually on top of the picture. And then what that lets you do is, if you go to the different states here, the normal state has no fill. The hover state has a very slight transparent fill. And then the pressed state has a very slight transparent fill. So it's actually pretty straightforward. The other thing that's a little odd about this in order to get this to work is that you want because I put a stroke on the hover. So what I mean by a stroke is there's a line on the hover where there isn't otherwise, is that you have to use the padding. I mean, I really, thank God for this padding stuff. I really love this padding, but you have to change the padding between normal and hover, see that 32, to account for the stroke, right? If you don't, you get this effect, right, where the text moves over a little bit because of the pixel. So pretty cool. You just on hover, just take that down one, and then you get this nice effect. So this is what we're doing. We're divorcing the icons from the buttons themselves so that it's slightly transparent. And the thing about the transparency of the icon is that if we make the, now they look kind of pink, which is kind of handy. But do whatever you want to do for the icon itself. That's not really what we're talking about in this tutorial. But I think keeping the icon outside the button makes for something that's the most portable, because now we have something that we can resize pretty easily, right? And that still looks okay. Whereas doing that with this, if I want to resize, I have to go back to Photoshop. So I hope that helps, and thanks for checking it out.